Welcome back, everyone. There have been hundreds of studies focusing on the minimum wage, yet top economists are still uncertain about the consequences of raising it. So when Seattle announced a jump to $15 per hour this week, it placed the city into uncharted territories.
18-year-old Corey Prescott is a sole provider for his family. He worked at Wendy's for 6 months for $7.25 an hour, not enough to pay a $1,200 mortgage.
Working there, man, it's tiring. It's a headache, basically. Like, managers always yelling at you, not doing their work, but yet want you to work. It's crazy working there, man.
Today, he joined hundreds of fast food workers in more than 100 cities. All of them walked off the job and demanded to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour.
Yes, it's tough because I don't get help from the government at all. I don't get no form of assistance, so it's tough.
Nationwide, these 6 states initiated efforts to increase the wage. New Jersey will increase to $8.25 an hour. Washington has the highest wage than any state in the U.S. at $9.19 an hour, and New York plans to raise the minimum to $9 an hour by 2015.
It's definitely not enough.
Councilman of Brooklyn Jumaane Williams says the wage battle demonstrates inequality in the U.S.
There are people making billions of dollars while people can't subsist. So we just have to balance that out, and that's what this is about.
60% of low-wage workers are on food assistance, so despite the growing attention, these hardworking Americans face an uphill battle.
Joining us now is Dr. Michael Mckoy from Rutgers University, and from our Washington, D.C. studio is Arun Gupta, a columnist and co-founder of The Independent. Thanks for joining us. Arun, can you hear us? Okay, so we're going to start with you, Dr. Mckoy, since it's always nice to see you. Thanks for coming back. Okay, well, let's get the, I always say let's take the temperature of our panelists right now. Do you think that this experiment in Seattle is going to work? We'll start with you.
I want it to work. I'm pessimistic that it will, because with the face of all these minimum wage fights, there are always minimum wage employees of billion-dollar companies. So will this really hurt Wendy's, McDonald's? I doubt it. It'll probably work well for the workers. What I'm worried about is, what about small businesses that are going to either have to lay off people because of this increase or have to just cut hours? Again, you know, you show a fast food worker there, and yeah, Wendy's can probably take the hit. They're not going to withdraw from Seattle, but I wonder what's going to happen to Seattle's small business base. That's my biggest concern.
It's going to be interesting, because we've seen a lot of studies, and even the economists can't agree. So, Dr. Rosenberg, just your thoughts.
Well, I think first of all, this is one in a series of arguments about raising the minimum wage, and it's not just a U.S.-based system. It's been going on in Europe for a while. There was just a vote.
But I just want to get your just give me your opinion.
I think that basically, I think that the American public has a reaction generally against low-wage workers and not really being in support of them. And at the same time, we're watching the NBA finals and the hockey finals. The players are getting astronomical salaries, and people are glorifying them as look how wonderful it is that our team can pay them $120 million. So there's an imbalance, I think, in terms of respect for someone's work. And I think ultimately that's what's going on.
Okay, and Dee Dee, your thoughts?
I think $15 an hour is absurd. One of our producers who works really, really hard doesn't make that, and it's just too much. And I don't believe a minimum wage at all. I think the businesses should dictate that. If you don't think it's enough money, well, then don't work there. Work somewhere else or get a second job.
Well, it's certainly going to spur the conversation to other cities. Obviously, everybody's going to be watching this city right now. But, you know, the question is, like, how did Seattle manage to do this?
Well, I mean, I think, you know, one of the sort of untold stories about what's going on in American politics is the sort of the rise of the left in the Democratic Party. We have all this focus on the Tea Party and the right wing of the Republican Party. There's a major groundswell movement on the Democratic Party of the left in support of the low wage earners. And Dr. Rosenberg, I take your point about our disrespect for low-wage workers. I think you're absolutely right. There's no disagreement here. My concern is that you can pay an athlete $1 million, and that's sort of market value. It's not going to hurt the franchise. My concern is, will this hurt small business? Will this hurt,
the mom and pop shops?
Exactly,
Of course it
because
will.
aren't we actually just perpetuating now large corporations who can pay a $15 minimum wage, and we're hurting the small businesses that we all say we want to encourage? We're actually discouraging them. And so my problem is not that we're putting down low-wage workers too much, we need to elevate them. My problem is, are we actually now by our policies hurting the small business owners? Like a lot of these minimum wage workers, maybe they have dreams to start their own businesses. Will this be prohibitive?
I think the other side of that, and we're not really in disagreement,
I don't think we are, no.
is though that while I don't want to speak against small business owners, I have tons of friends that are small business owners, but part of their job as the owner is to make their business profitable. And it's not necessary to make it profitable on the backs of low-wage workers. They should be able to figure out better ways to market their company, to be able to develop new products and services. And as a result, that's one component in their total price and their total business model. So I think that the workers are the ones at the end that are suffering. And if you add up how much they make and what the expenses are to live in our society, they don't jive too well.
We also want to check in with Arun Gupta down in Washington, D.C. And Arun, we apologize for that connection earlier. Obviously, we're talking about the minimum wage hike in Seattle. Just your thoughts initially on this, and do you, obviously the country is going to be watching this. Do you think it's going to work?
Oh, certainly, it will work. I think the problem is that it's not fast enough, not quick enough. McDonald's made $5.5 billion in profits last year. They can certainly afford to pay $15 right away, but they have until 2017 to reach 2018 if any franchisees offer health care. Small businesses have until 2021, we're talking 7 years from now, to reach $15 an hour, and they can also pay their workers partially in tips and health care until 2025. This is a very modest plan. All the projections say it will essentially transfer $3 billion worth of income to working people in Seattle over the next decade. It'll cut poverty by 30%. But let's put that in perspective. Steve Ballmer, who is one of the leading executives at Microsoft for decades, just offered $2 billion for the Los Angeles Clippers, overpaying by $1 billion. There's a tremendous amount of wealth in Seattle and a tremendous amount of wealth in this country, and workers should be paid a living wage. I think the real experiment that's been going on is forcing tens of millions of Americans into just terrible living conditions, just really hard lives based on the Reagan economy that we've had in place for the last 35 years. The destruction of good paying jobs, the offshoring of manufacturing, and the war on unions and organized labor. And what we need is finally to recognize is people need to make a living wage, and there's plenty of wealth in this country to be able to pay them to do that.
Arun, we thank you for those insights. Dee Dee, I'm imagining that you want to respond to that.
Yeah, look, what about the businesses? I think the businesses should be able to pay whatever they want, and it's not on the back. These poor workers, let them get another job. Let them get a job where they can move up into management. I'm sorry, but this is a job killer. $15 an hour to work at Wendy's? No way. Small businesses, there's no way they can absorb that. So what that does is that's a business killer. And in our country, it should be free market. As far as these teams, hey, if they make that money, good for them. That's the free market. If they can make that money, that's good. And business should be able to pay whatever they can and whatever they want to. It's not dictated by workers. If they don't want to work, they don't have to.
Well, it's certainly going to be an interesting experiment that I think that many major cities and a lot of mayors are going to be watching, and certainly we will be as well. We also want to talk about that GM recall, though. Certainly some news there as well. The recall we found out this week has not really actually hurt the sales of the cars at all, but they certainly did have a rather scathing report that came out this week about the corporate conditions within the company. Anybody want to comment on that?
Well,
Dr. Rosenberg?
I think the reality is that the automobile industry for decades has had problems with issues like that, going back to the Ford Pinto, where they made a rational calculation. It was better to pay the insurance, to pay people off after they were killed or badly burned than to fix a little bolt on their car. In this case, I think it wasn't quite so clear. I mean, it was a sense that maybe several people just didn't want to assume responsibility. And I think the good news is, though, that GM
I'd like to jump in on that. Actually, it's quite clear.
I'm sorry, Arun, go on.
Okay, the federal government was investigating GM back in 2007 and deciding whether to open a case based on what was going on with the Cobalt and the Saturn. The lawyers knew about it, the engineers knew about it, the marketing department knew about it. They came up with this internal training manual that said you are not to use terms like Kevorkian-esque, rolling sarcophagus, or Corvair. That was a GM car that Ralph Nader brought to public attention with his unsafe at any speed that really launched the consumer rights movements. You know, they've known about this, they covered it up. The question is, why aren't these executives being prosecuted? They killed at least 13 people. A Reuters investigation has found that it may be as high as 74 people. And GM is also under investigation for another one of its models, a Grand Cherokee, involved in 51 deaths for post-crash fires.
Well,
so
Arun,
what you have here is just
Arun,
epic criminality that the company is covering up.
Arun, we're going to have to cut you short a little bit because we're going to run out of time. Quick question for the entire panel. We haven't seen sales go down, but do you think the public will give another nod after the scathing report? Arun?
Well, I would hope so, but you know what really needs to be done is the Justice Department needs to bring those responsible to prosecution.
Dee Dee?
I would agree. I think the CEO is handling it well. The new one, Mary Barra, the woman, I think that she's going to get to the bottom of it, but I would like to see more done. Some of these executives, they should be prosecuted.
No, I absolutely agree, and I think the reason why we're not seeing a hit in the public is because I don't think this has been a widely publicized story, and I think that also goes to the point of, again, lack of prosecutions, as Dr. Gupta just said, and I hate to say this, but almost a sort of a media complicity and not underreporting the story. Same thing with Toyota. They didn't take a hit after all their recalls, and I think if this was reported more and prosecuted more, you'd probably see more of a public reaction.
Plus, nobody's going to go to riding bikes. Everybody needs a car.
Dr. Rosenberg, final thoughts.
I think the reality is that the American public, as the argument said, probably is not aware, and they also have a sense of invincibility. They don't think it's going to happen in their vehicle.
Yes.
They're driving, they've been driving for a while, and they're just going to look at the base price on the car and see what they want to buy.
That's a good point, because my father was always like, oh, I don't have to, the recall's not going to hurt me. We all want to do one more thing, though, before we go on this segment. We want to congratulate New Jersey Governor Chris Christie. He was named Father of the Year, and Dee Dee, I'm sure you're very happy about that. But his kids, did you hear the comment about his, when he said this to his kids? He said to his children, hey, I won Father of the Year. They're like, hey, we didn't vote. And they were like, and they all sat there, and he said they just were dumbfounded that he won Father of the Year.
I think the Christie family's a fun family.
You
may disagree with them politically, but they're all a fun group.
I think that's why he won Father of the Year, because they seem like a real family, that, you know, good give and take among them, so good for him.
Bill Clinton won earlier, Shaquille O'Neal, so he's joining an elite group there.
Joining a random group, yeah.
Arun Gupta in Washington, D.C., thank you for joining us here on Fresh Outlook.
Thank you for having me.
And keep it here, everyone. Unfortunately, we will be talking about another round of violence here in the U.S. We'll be back with much more on that when we return.